I'm going to start streaming. I'm going to move that over here. We're going to see if the video capture device, if we can turn that on. Do we have that? Why won't my video capture device go on? Let's see. Wow. Okay. So let's go here. We'll move that up. Okay. Oh! Display capture. Look at that. Super amazing. Oh, whoops. Whoops, whoops, whoops. Are we streaming? Okay. Okay. We are going to see if this works. We'll see if it works. Try not to close this out. Let's turn off this this guy, quit flux, disable until sunrise. Ooh, it's kind of a harsh color. All right. Okay, we've got some people coming in. How's the audio quality? I listened with horror after being on last time, and it was very echoey. That problem should be resolved, but I screw up a lot. So let me know how it's going. Yes. Okay. Can someone give me a feedback on the audio, and we'll do a little bit of a sound check just to make sure, so we can get that right off the bat. Got my coffee ready. Got my water. SodaStream. Keeps me from having to trek bottles all the way across Berlin. And in case things get a little crazy, but you know, alcohol is where all bad ideas originate from. So usually you need to, when you're making music, you need to be more self-aware, and I found that alcohol doesn't improve that. So let's do a little sound check. I'm just going to play this audio. We'll play this live session. So I already can see that we're going to have some processor situation. So I'm just going to start by freezing tracks. Like I said, the computers that are built for streaming are usually gamers that are streaming. Their computers are super crazy anyways. And I just don't have that. So we're going to make do by freezing tracks. Someone mentioned this in the last session, that you can freeze tracks to free up processor power, all you have to do is right click or command click and or rather control click, sorry. You can freeze the track and that basically processes it and stores it as audio until you unfreeze it, and then it's actually making that, you can't control anything once it's frozen, but you can still get the sound. It's basically turning it into an audio loop or an audio track, and you can still get the sound, but if you want to edit it, then you need to unfreeze the track. So, seeing if we've got some people coming in, and I'll see if the chat window doesn't always keep me updated. Quality is good, no echo, little crazy, just need some bourbon now. Aaron, I still have the bourbon you gave me, and it is very, very valuable to me right now. Hopefully decaf, no, I'm kind of immune to caffeine, so it's gonna be all good. Ben, you never sleep. Stop acting like it's just Saturday that you don't sleep. Okay, so quick overview for those who just tuned in. We had kind of worked on this track, well, not kind of, we started from the beginning, and this track is actually available on a Dropbox link on if you go to my Instagram profile, it's in the bio, and you can grab that link, and there's a lot of sample packs in there, a lot of sample folders. There are a couple sessions from me that are self-contained, so you could just pull up those sessions if you downloaded the whole folder. And in that folder is this actual session. One other thing that I want to try to do is see if I can make the mouse pointer big. I think I figured out that issue thanks to the help of the people on here. And display cursor size. I can make a big cursor here. Is that going to be big enough? It starts getting a little complicated to use it if I don't. Can everybody see this cursor? Any feedback on that? Yeah, it's showing up on my end. So, okay. So we created this this track from the ground up, and I just played around with stuff, and I was getting a lot of questions about how to do arrangements. Lots of people that say that I can create loops all day long, but then whenever I get to arrangement, it gets a little bit complicated. And how do I do arrangement? The reality of it is it's like anything with a frustrating answer. There's no right answer, no right way to go about it. Just a little bit of experience from my end is that you kind of wait for this feeling of when I'm working in session view, and you don't have to work in session view, you can go straight to arrangement view, and sometimes I do, but if it starts to feel like I wouldn't want any more elements in the current loop than what I already have, then for me, it's better to build the busiest parts of the track in arrangement view and kind of start from the busiest parts of the track and then reduce back. Sometimes you can build things up, but I a lot of times like to build what would pretty much be the middle of the track first and then work backwards from there. So what I'll do, and this is a pretty lazy approach, but it works. I just hit record and it'll start recording. If you hit the tab key, it'll take you over to arrangement view. And I'll just let this kind of run its course for a little bit. So this isn't, after I just told you I like to build the busiest parts, this isn't necessarily the busiest part of the track, but busy enough to where I can start using it as a building block. So I'll take all of this, and there's a lot of different ways you can do this. You could have copied and pasted stuff. You can do everything. This is the most simple thing. So I would run it out to about, let's say about 2 minutes. And something if you have no experience with producing or DJing, something to keep in mind is the up in this arrangement view. Again, if you hit tab, it'll take you to arrangement view. You can go back and forth between arrangement and session view. In arrangement view here, first I'm going to click off this, because this little orange button here in the top corner, that's actually obscured by my photo, but you can see it on your screen. This will deactivate if you have clips that are triggering in session view. It'll override those clips temporarily until you click this, and then that restores everything to it's playing exactly what's on arrangement view. So now we've got a sequence that's just basically a loop that's stretched out for 2 minutes. So you're not going to realistically have that. But you can start look at arrangement view. One way to look at it, and again, you can work like a carpenter and start from nothing and build into something, or you can work like a sculptor and have this huge block of material, and then you start chiseling away. Okay, so sometimes I work like a carpenter, and sometimes I work like a sculptor. In this case, this would be kind of like working like a sculptor, because I've got most of the elements, and now I need to reduce them and get them to fit into different places. So it also depends, like I said, it just depends on a lot of different factors. So yeah, I'm gonna start playing this out. And again, because this is a pretty processor intensive thing, as if my processor starts hiccuping, I might freeze tracks. I'm gonna freeze this track right now, actually. Okay. So this is actually pretty reduced already. If you would have to decide, I actually think that this could be just the beginning right here. Maybe what I would do to start things out, here's the sound you've been hearing in the background. Filters are gonna be such a good friend with sculpting a track and bringing in elements and bringing them out. Sometimes when you completely drop an element out, you'll find the track loses a lot of its energy. And what I would encourage you to do in that situation is, if you find that when you drop something out, it loses the vibe of the track, then to just drop in a filter and filter it down so it's not completely out of the picture, but it's kind of moved it to the background, so that other elements can come up to the foreground. So let's also, if you hit the A key, that's gonna show up what's called the automation lanes on the tracks right here. So if you hit A, they disappear. Hit A again and they reappear. So Whoops. First mistake I've made all my life. Let's see what we... This track's gonna need a little bit more if I'm gonna keep it, but I don't think I'm gonna keep it. Again, I cannot emphasize enough, do not be worried about deleting tracks, or I'm gonna just move it down here in case it comes in handy later, but for now, it has been voted off the island. So, what I would like to do is, there was a friend of mine who gave some of his time and energy to the sample library. And if you go into that folder that you just got, in the Dropbox link, you will find that there is a Alexander Kowalski pack. And I really liked, he had volunteered his services and he made a great set of samples. And I have always, for me, Alexander Kowalski is one of the best architects of chords and like kind of these Detroit-y vibe chords. So I'm thinking that this track would be really nice to have some of that, and we're gonna try it out. So I will go back to session view. And sometimes you can just play around with stuff. And Alex did a really good tutorial, kind of explaining his sample packs and giving some tips that we'll be able to visit whenever I'll post that video online. And again, I'm gonna have to freeze this track. Normally, if I'm not streaming, this would be you're looking at, it's probably consuming, when you're using all Ableton instruments, it consumes such little processing power. This would be consuming about 10%, but the video card and everything is having a lot of trouble with the stream. So hope you understand and bear with me on that. Okay, so I really love these sounds, and okay, I might just see what this sounds like if we just drop that in. Such a nice sound. Thanks, Alex. And what I'll do is I'm gonna drop it in, instead of dropping it in as an audio loop, I'm actually gonna use it, I'm dumping it into the sampler, okay? And the reason I'm doing that, if you dump something into the sampler and it's a loop, if you play it, just at a C, it's gonna sound exactly, if you, C3, so that's gonna sound exactly like that because the default note on your sampler is gonna be the middle C, okay? So what I mean by the middle C is C3 when you draw in a note. If I were to take it up here, then it sounds different, right? Okay. These samples are at 128. And I just turned on the warp so it knows it. So now we've got a perfectly cut sample. Maybe I'll we'll go back to that. So I'm gonna just see what this sounds like whenever I draw it back in. Got some friends trolling me on the Facebook Live stuff. One thing that a little tip, if you're in this situation and you're having to just like freeze every track, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna group this because I need access to the filter, but so I group this track, but it's just one track. I'm gonna drag the filter into the audio track that's the actual audio group. And then this way, now I've got the ability to freeze this track right here, okay? So freeze that. And we're getting there. Alex, I'm jacking your loops already. Sounding good. Okay, yeah. I'm gonna filter down that bass line a little bit. Give it just but I'm also gonna give it a little bit of a bump. Something that I like to do is create like a little bit. Sometimes you can use a tom for this. Sometimes you can use a kick drum, but you have to like modify it just a little bit. So I'll show you what I'm about to do. And I'm gonna deploy again, these are samples that all of you have access to through the generosity of a lot of artists. And I'm gonna use the Chris Liebing kicks, if I can find them. Liebing kick selection. So what I'll do here is drag that in there. And we're gonna bring the so that the kick that I'm using, that's what it sounds like. The chip kick right here. But if you drop it into a sampler and you bring up that attack so you don't have the snap, so it becomes almost like you can make kicks kind of into a bass note by shaping it. And then if you wanted to, you can also bring down the frequency, which is right here on the sampler. And so bring that down. And if you bring this clip, like right now, it's kind of got a nice little groove to it. Let's see if. Just to give it a little bit of a bounce to it. And again, I'm producing this on headphones, and headphones are limiting with like the mixing and the mastering, how far you're gonna be, but for creative purposes, you can really get most of it taken care of. I've written a big portion of a lot of my tracks on headphones. It's just not as sexy on Instagram, but Yeah, there's your secrets. A lot of times, a lot of these studios that have tons and tons of gear, you end up. I mean, go look at so many times you see a studio session with these huge pop musicians, and they've got this huge SSL console, and then a laptop just sitting right on top of it. So, yeah. I'm gonna see what this does. So what you can do is, if you've got a loop like this, this is a 1-bar loop, but I've got it stretched out over 8 bars. Pay attention to these numbers. If you've never, I interrupted myself earlier, but if you've never DJ'd or produced, this is basically what we call a phrase. And you have these phrases that from every 8 bars, a bar is 4 beats, and 8 bars is, I think the correct musical term is a measure, but I might be embarrassing myself there. And we would call it phrasing as a DJ. So when the DJ's playing and you kind of feel when the music's about to change. Like we all know what it is, we've just never had it defined in concrete terms. But basically, there's no rules, but a lot of times you'll experience changes in every 32 beats or something like this. So, yeah. Sorry I'm missing a lot of these messages as I'm working, but I promise I'll respond. If I don't respond during this session, then I'll respond as we get finished with it. Also, write in there and just tell me what your situation is and how you're doing with all this quarantine stuff and how you're holding up and where you're based out of. I'd love to hear people's stories and how people are doing. So, okay, this is a 1-bar loop, and you have it's looped. But if you consolidate by hitting Control-click. If you consolidate it, now we've got the loop, the segment of the loop that I had. It was an 8-bar. It was looping for 8 bars, and then when I consolidate it, it writes out that whole loop. So now we've got something to play with here. So if I take this and I think it's fine the way it is, actually. No additions needed, so we'll continue on with it. Something that you can do, though, is there's a little trick that actually, again, this is a blind observatory trick, and it's amazing. He's taught me a lot in a couple days in the studio. That's the thing is you will always, every time, if you're learning production, get together with people, learn about their process. I promise you, you could meet with, sometimes I meet with a producer who's been producing for like 6 months, and some of the things that they're doing blows my mind, because there's no right or wrong way to work in Ableton, and so everybody's got a different process, and sometimes I just want to sit there with a notepad. So you can always learn from every producer and try to meet up with people that are producing and learn their process as much as possible, because you'll just get so many ideas. So I'm going to insert a return track, which again, these are the things, the audio tracks that you can send audio with these knobs here. You can send audio through them, and these can be your friends for really moving along audio and keeping it going. So I've already got a little preset here that I have in the user library. Presets, audio effects, audio effect rack. Let's do a return delay filter. Okay. Okay. I am unfortunately I'm using a non-Ableton plugin, so I'm gonna switch these out, and I will put in the auto filter here, and then I will put in a delay here, and it's the plugins that I use, those are SoundToys plugins, and I love them to pieces, but they're not essential for the project at hand. And you can do most things with most plugins. That's a really important thing to take away from this. So if I have just this trusty Kowalski loop, I'm going to let's bring this. I'm gonna filter out the low end on this return track, because things can get once you start crowding too much stuff in the low end, things can get really muddy really fast. So just be mindful of that. But so now I've got a delay track and a filter that are working together in the return track, and it's basically doing a lot of the work for you where it never has. Blind Observatory is here. Make the return track filter a high pass and filter on the source a low pass. Yes, that's what I was about to get to. So what he is talking about is, let's just duplicate this, and if you take this and run this, boom, So we've got things that you'll be able to see it better. I'll upload this session, but I've duplicated this track, and the filter is sweeping on the source audio. It's on a high pass, so it's climbing up. So if you see where this is, I wish the auto filter in Ableton kind of moved with it, but basically what it's doing is it's doing this and then coming back down. And it's doing that over the course of 8 beats, okay? And on the other side, it's doing the exact opposite. So it's doing a low pass, and so there's times where they kind of intersect with each other, and so it's never really repeating. And if you really want to get funky, then you can do a little offset so that they're never cycling on at the same time. Okay, so you can kind of see how, sorry, I had to change some stuff on the audio configuration, but while I'm freezing this track, you can kind of see just how much things move along where you, just by doing a lot of automated stuff. And some tracks honestly can be carried through with so few elements. If you notice, when I started working with this automation with the delays, I muted one of the tracks because it seemed like it wasn't even necessary anymore. So now I'll go back and revisit that. And that's the thing about arrangement is for me, writing and arranging and mixing and all of these different processes, when you're doing everything yourself, there's no rules that you have to do everything in chunks. You know, you can't say, like, if you start to arrange something and you're like, okay, this needs another element, then you don't say, no, I've got to arrange, I can't add new elements. Then you just kind of go back to the songwriting process, and then you go back to the arrangement process, and that's the way a lot of songwriting and stuff worked. Is you would have these so many different versions of songs, and then you would the bands would play a different song, and then they would come up with different lyrics because the band was playing a certain way or sing it a different way, and it would kind of ping pong back and forth, and so never get married to any idea that you have of saying that it has to stay. Nothing has to remain, or nothing has to stay the same until the day you send it off to mastering, or the day that you release the track. I would recommend having it figured out before you send it out to mastering, so that you don't drive the person crazy. But you get what I'm saying. So never get too focused on saying, okay, now's the process, now I'm going to do that. Now I'm going to start arranging, so I can't revisit the writing process. Okay? put a little saturation on this bass line. Do just a little overdrive. It's beer time. Cheers. Another really important thing is don't spill your drink on your computer. It's happened to me before, and it really slows down the process. I'll take this off the loop mode. Let's start from the beginning. Now that we've got things that are starting to take a little bit of shape. Oh, by the way, I'm going to switch out this kick drum because I was complaining about how I didn't like it, but I wanted to use this for the sake of everybody having access to it. Now you have access to more kick drums from some of the best kick drum makers in the business. So let's go to we have some leading kicks. I think they'll give us something to work with. Whoa. So for me, the vibe of this track is not like these are really good, these are really cool kicks, but the kick that I would be looking for in this case is something a little bit more round, if that makes sense. Like these are a little bit too punchy. I do think I might be able to work with this one. Volume just a little bit. I still like it where I still like it where I notch out this this kind of 600 hertz range in the kick drum, because it kind of makes it creates, instead of this like really thud feel, it creates kind of sorry I'm late, you're excused, you can come and go as you please. I'll just solo this kick drum here. See how it gets kind of slappy there, but if you bring that out a little bit, So I've got it down. I've got a pretty wide band on this. And the body of this kick is really, the stuff that really hits you in the chest is going to be between like 50 and 70 hertz. Like, and every kick drum is going to be different. But that's just, if you notice right here, there's a lot of sub bass that's never gonna really be heard on a big sound system, okay? So on small speakers, it can be really tempting to like push this up and it'll sound good, but you really wanna realize that this type of stuff is just gonna crowd the space. So if you take this like little, if you put on a high pass filter and roll it up a little bit, the sound doesn't really change. Not so much in the headphones, but the more you can roll off sounds without it changing the fundamental frequencies of stuff, the better off you'll be as you start to do the mixing process. So. I'm going to group this so that I can manipulate it a little bit while I'm not taking up too much processor. So something that I like to do is I just recently started, I changed my studio setup recently, and I've started automating the volume faders for the mix down process. But for the creative process, a lot of times I try not to automate any of these volume faders, and there's a reason why I do that. But what I'll do is I will take a, let's see, audio effect, do a utility plugin. It's super basic and it takes such little processor. And I will automate the gain here. So, wait, let's see. Whoops, I put the utility on the wrong. Yeah. Let's, instead of doing that, okay. I couldn't figure out why it was not working in my favor, but okay. So now I'm gonna automate the volume here instead of in the mixer. And the reason why is that I want to be able to keep, I want this volume to climb like this regardless of where it needs to sit in the mix towards the end. So I find it better if the volume is automated on something that's not the actual fader, okay? So let's go back to the beginning. Again, producing is sometimes like watching paint dry. So the fact that you all have chimed in on this is impressive, very devoted. Dave tomorrow, maybe a bit more explosive when this come in like a shot. And sometimes I've learned that like if you have these, for me personally, for a track like this, sometimes it's nice to just have it slowly morph and then kind of crawl into your mind, if you will, versus having these like shocking sounds sometimes. I mean, there's a place for everything, but in this I don't necessarily see that here yet. I could change my mind in 5 minutes. How's everyone doing with this coronavirus stuff? I think it hasn't really set in with me yet. Still kind of processing it. So let's take this back here. These are always the times where I'll like bang my head up against the desk in my studio for hours and hours and hours and be like, I can't make music. I don't know how to arrange stuff. And then like, I'm supposed to be home by like, I've said that I'll be home by like 7:30 for dinner or whatever. And then like 6:45, something kicks in. That's how it always works, but that's life. Okay, so now if you just notice, I duplicated the whole thing. Not because that's gonna remain that way, but it just kind of stretches it out a little bit more. And we're gonna start back a little bit from, not from the top, because the first 16 bars, you don't really, not the most eventful thing in techno tracks. That probably right there is where something that I need to start bringing in this again. Does anybody have any questions or anything? I'm kind of just working along the way, and just let me know if there's any questions that you have as we're going. Trying to go back to the chat room. Any questions about certain things that I'm doing? Any weird quirks that you want to have explained? And again, I'm going to upload this session for everybody to have a look at. So don't stress yourself out too much if you can't figure things out. But yeah, I'll just keep working. And if there's, what headphones am I currently using? I am using Sennheiser HD25 twos. Yeah, they're the twos. They're like the standard DJ headphone. They're not necessarily the best or most accurate sounding ones. Actually, I've got, I can't find them. But there's more accurate sounding headphones, but I do find that these guys will make my ears the least sore if I'm ever working in headphones. And a lot of times these are what I DJ with. So they're just something that I'm used to. And on these, I actually have the velour pads. I would not recommend using the velour pads whenever you're DJing, because that will just become one giant cigarette butt. But how do you add melodic elements or transitional effects? Good question. One thing that I will definitely do, if you notice, for example, here with this sequence, I've got the duplicated version of this Kowalski loop that's just basically the effects chain, and it's sweeping in and out. But because I've got the send here, you'll see what happens. I bring down the volume all the way. You'll see it coming up here. Okay, things like that, little subtleties like that. Again, I go through different writing styles, but lately I've been in kind of the writing style of for a long time I relied really heavily on these, like every 32 beats or every 8 bars, like something like had to be kind of like shocking the system. And it really depends. I was talking with Dustin Zahn today, and I was like, well, what would you tell them if when I'm working on arrangements and stuff? And anybody that knows Dustin knows that he is making a lot of different types of music. And of course he said, well, it depends. And that's actually the best answer you can have. But for these type of things, you need to decide what you want the feel to be. And the better of an idea that you have of what you want to do will reduce the clutter and reduce kind of just, a lot of times when I'm not inspired with the track, I just find myself throwing in parts and adding parts because I don't know what else to do. And I don't know, I'm just kind of stuck. And what I've found a lot of times, if you start finding yourself adding elements to something and it just kind of takes away from the track each time you add an element, try going against your instinct and actually reducing stuff. You know, sometimes it's such a cliche, but sometimes less really is more. Kyle, do you VBR or continuous bitrate when I convert from WAV to MP3? I use continuous bitrate, but if you're converting, and I use a lame codec, I don't use the iTunes codec or anything like that. I have this. Let's see if I've got it here. Nope. I'll show you this Max. If I can find it. Yeah. So it's this guy right here. It's Max. It is Macintosh audio for OS X, and sbooth.org/max, and you can set all the different settings. So just as something at high quality, and you'll be fine. Regarding add melodic elements or transitional effects, Domingo, we talked about the transitional effects. I do feel like this could have a little bit of a melodic element, maybe like a high lead or something. So I'm gonna start messing with that a little bit. This sounds very, very French Kiss right now, which is one of the best tracks of all time. And Deep Chord, Deep Child, two great producers, but Deep Child has contributed to the sample pack as well. And there were some vocals that were kind of cool in there that I feel like I might revisit this little part right here. So I'm gonna take this out. Drums, beats. Deep Child. Techno Gifts is the name of the folder. We've got some Vox loops.
Back. Purpose. Purpose.
Let's try it. But it does not need to loop that often if it's gonna work at all. It might not. Let's rinse it out a little bit. Let's see what this sounds like when we Nope. Okay. It's a happy accident. So I've got it on slice mode. And in Alex's tutorial, he actually does a really good explanation of this. So I'll save a little bit of explanation and that'll come out here pretty soon. But I put it in slice mode. So what that means is that each one of these slices is a different note on your piano roll. Your piano roll is this little clip. And so I can keep duplicating this loop. Omer, which elements of a song do you usually end up compressing? What's your approach to it? do not compress anything that does not need compression. I know that's a frustrating answer, but also for years as a producer, I had really no idea how compression worked. And I just had been told all the time that I needed to compress things. And I didn't know what it meant, but I just threw compressors on it, and 9 times out of 10, it made the track worse. So it is okay to not use something that you don't know how to use. And you can still make great stuff with it. A lot of stuff doesn't require compression. A lot of these samples are already like well sound designed, and they might already have processing on them. So yeah, I don't apply rules to it. Sometimes whenever I need to, compression just is something that I use to make stuff fit a little bit better, but you can also do things. Here's a little trick with that. So, like, keep in mind that compression, when compression first rolled out, they didn't have the equipment that we have now. So, for example, something like side chaining stuff, side chaining is just basically, it's a really easy thing to do because you can trigger your compressor to compress something when the kick drum's hitting, for example. And so when the kick drum goes up, then it starts compressing your bass line down. And I use sidechain compression all the time. But what you can also do here this is the bass line here. If instead of doing sidechain compression, you can actually shape stuff in the envelope in Ableton. So you've got your envelope, you've got the kick, you can do the volume right here, okay? Here's where your kick's gonna hit. If this bass line, this little bass note or bass hit is pretty tight, so it's not really getting in the way of the kick, but let's say it was, I could drop this volume down like this when the kick drum is hitting, and no one would be, the listener would be none the wiser, I think is the term. So yeah, so now I've got this notched out, and I've made space for the kick drum just by automating the volume on something. You could do this with a filter. You could do this with a number of different things. So that if you're having trouble wrapping your mind around compression and not knowing when to use it, when not to, or whatever, then maybe there's other. Ask yourself what you're trying to do with it, and then figure out what the best tool is to accomplish that. If you wanna have your kick drum and your bass kind of glued a little bit better together, I use a compressor. There's a Fab Filter compressor that I absolutely love. But Ableton's compressors, they're fine. They're fine, and for years, every plugin that I used in Ableton got me from A to B. The first record I wrote was almost all stock Ableton plugins. So there you have it. I'm proud of that record in that it was my first record, but you know, I feel like I could do better now. Let me read some other questions while we're going back through this. Domingo, can you explain you said if too many elements were added, can frequency shifting things work too? Meaning, like, can you filter them in and out? Absolutely. I had actually, when you had come in a little bit late, but that was the first thing that I did was talked about how filtering can be a really valuable tool to bring something and reduce something out of the mix. without taking away the full energy of it. So, yeah. Now that you got me talking about compression, I do feel like this could be working a little bit together. I'm gonna put this. I'd forgotten about this little noise floor here. This guy. Very subtle, but a lot of things, in the creation process, a lot of times it's a lot more of an active process. In the arrangement process, for me, it's a lot of just kind of sitting and listening and feeling things out. And that's why sometimes it can be hard to teach on arrangement, because I want people to, I'm doing it on the fly, because I also want people to not have the abbreviated version of what I'm doing. And I don't want you to have an abbreviated version of the process, and whether that's the right way to go about it or not, I don't know. But I think it's important to see kind of the drawn out process of getting a feel for a track. You can't just listen when you start arranging. Instead of just listening to 5 seconds or 10 seconds of a track on repeat, you're listening to 3 minutes of a track on repeat. So it becomes a little bit of a longer and more drawn out process. When using different synthesizers, I often figure that the single elements are sounding pretty good, but the whole track doesn't really feel like one thing. Are there some tricks, advice you can do, or do I just need to work on my sound design skills? Christoph, that's a good question. First off, everybody can work on their sound design skills. So yes, you can work on your sound design skills, as can I, as can the best sound designers in the world. But a lot of times, it's never personal if an element doesn't work with the track as the track starts building around it. And like I keep emphasizing, don't be afraid to like save. If there's an element that you really like, save that element, even if it doesn't make sense for that track. It might come in handy later. And what I often do is, sometimes I'm in a creative mood and I'm making a lot of different loops and stuff, and then that's gonna end up coming in handy for whenever I'm uninspired in different directions. So a lot of times I'll have a bunch of loops that I've created, and sometimes I need to step back from them. Sometimes I need to say, you know what, if I don't get this whole track written all at once, then I'm gonna forget what I was trying to accomplish with it, you know? So never be discouraged whenever a certain element doesn't fit with the whole track together. Sound design wise, there's different ways to give sounds kind of tone and character. The filter is your friend. Be easy on saturation and stuff. Try to get the shape, the majority of the shape of your sound, get from the actual synth itself, and learn that process. Learn synthesis as good as you can, because you'll be able to better control that. But a lot of times you're being able to filter stuff and know where it sits. Also, do not discount the fact that whenever it starts to come together with the track, don't discount. Sometimes I'm like, this bass line sounded great, and it doesn't sound great anymore, and your instinct might be to change the bass line or to delete the bass line, when really you need to change the notation because it's not in key anymore. So just consider that. The track sounds amazing. About the vocal, do you think that it matters that to pitch the note correctly to the track, or you can go random with the note and it'll work it as you did before? Go with your feelings. Sometimes stuff. But just to clarify on this, let me show you what I did here. Just to clarify with this vocal from Deep Child, it's in slice mode, which is a newer, they rolled out the slice mode in Ableton, I think when they rolled out Push 2, if I'm not mistaken. And this chops up this vocal that you see here, this chops up the vocal into different parts. So when you're playing, what you see on this piano roll, these aren't different notes or pitches. They're triggering different parts of the sample. So you'll see, I'm gonna play it. Look at the stuff lighting up there. So hopefully that clarifies things. But yeah, I mean, pay attention to pitch. Pay attention to pitch for everything. For a long time, I always thought, okay, pitch matters for melodies, and then I ignored everything else. Every sound has a pitch, and getting all of those to fit together is super important. That can be the difference between a track that really takes off and a track that just goes flat. A lot of times, if a track goes flat and you can't figure out why, you sometimes have key pitch issues within the track. Hope that helps. Okay, I thought that was a question to Blind Observatory, but Blind Observatory was Superman and chimed in. Thanks, David. We're going to take this all the way from the beginning now. What do you do for ear fatigue or track fatigue? Domingo, I keep the volume low, and I'm really bad about that. I listen to tracks way too loud in the studio. I really shouldn't do it. I'm always, for gigs and stuff, I am always wearing earplugs, hearing protection, but I do need to work on monitoring lower. And actually when you're mixing tracks, it's super important to have a very low volume. The lower the volume, the more accurate it's gonna be. When you start cranking stuff up, it stands to really confuse your ears with the mix process. Thanks, George. Saturday night, and we're sitting on our couch making jams in Ableton on Facebook. What a trip. We'll have to remember this, but things will be all right. But this is just a strange and interesting time. Truncate sample kit. Let's drop this guy in, see what happens. I thought that they were hitting like a little too crass for what I was trying to create, so I just brought the attack up. So it's like it's a hi-hat, but it's kind of behaving like a shaker. Let's even see what it does when I pitch it down. Like I said, the undo key is your friend. Someone asked about compression. I can't remember who it was, but here's a place where I would use compression, side chaining specifically, because here you can kind of hear it's like it just sounds a little static, and I can give it a nice bounce if I just put a compressor on here. And for those who, I kind of skipped over this, but side chaining is basically, I'm going to try my best to give compression lesson. Okay, here you see the thing that says threshold. That is saying when the volume of the input goes above this threshold, that's when you engage the compressor. So imagine you had this like huge garbage can, and it crushed the trash. Once the trash got high enough, it would crush the trash. Okay? That's kind of what a compressor is doing. Is once the audio gets above a certain point, then a mechanism comes in and starts compressing it. Okay? And you can trigger, like right now, it's going, the compressor is being triggered by the audio that's on that channel. But what I can do is if I go to sidechain, I can choose to automate it with something else. So in this case, I want to automate it with the kick drum. I don't know if you can hear it. So compare. Let's just play this solo, and we'll play right here. Okay. No compressor. With the compressor on. Now it's off. And sometimes when you compress it, you need to make up the volume on it. So you can hear the difference, right? Thanks, Kyan. I agree with Kyan. The SonarWorks reference is really good. I don't use it for my speakers. I have a different EQ in my studio for that, but I use the reference for the headphones, and it is really, really good. Headphones are liars, and SonarWorks kind of takes that into consideration, and it'll adjust it. It's a little bit pricey, but for what it does, it's well worth the money. If you're wanting to, I don't want to overstate something, but if you're wanting to use your headphones as your primary option for production, and sometimes that's what you have to do, then SonarWorks is a really good way to have that kind of a corrective measure put on your headphones. Is everybody else hearing? Is anybody else hearing clipping on the track? Let me know. I think it's Keon. I can't see if it's Keon or Clan. I think it's Keon, but I'm reading the messages on a faraway window. Any tips on how to get the levels right? Often my lows sound too high on monitors and my highs sound too low on headphones. Yeah, that seems to be a hardware issue. Okay, I'm starting to figure out where people are hearing from. But yeah, sometimes it's good to cross-reference like between speakers and headphones, but if both of them are inaccurate, then getting it to sound good on, like we always say, oh, if you can get it to sound good on every set of speakers, then it's gonna be good. But if you've got two liars in a room, hearing both of their stories isn't gonna help you find the truth, if that makes sense. So the best thing to do is you're never gonna get an audio source perfect unless you're in like a $200,000 studio. We're all producing in imperfect rooms, and it's gonna be about getting things as close to possible, or as close to accurate as possible. So work on that. Okay. That hi-hat needs to come back in. What else you can do is you can duplicate this. I got that. That to me is where the hi-hat needs to come in. So we'll just, you can, a thing in Ableton with a good friend of yours is gonna be, you can do edit and you can do delete, but a good friend of yours is going to be to delete time, which means that if, for example, let's undo this. So I say, okay, I need this part of the track needs to happen 8 bars earlier. If I do this, and oh man, now I'm forgetting the Command Shift X, it takes all the time out. I think that's, yeah, it's cutting time. So I have that to my clipboard, but it does the same thing. You can do the same thing with Command Shift Delete, and it'll delete the time. And once I get kind of this outline created, then I'll start really chopping stuff down to kind of make it move along better. Okay? And again, there's no wrong way to go about doing this, but yeah, we're gonna listen to it one more time, and then see where we're at, and then I'll take questions at the end, and we'll call it a night. So let's listen through. Yeah, those clicks that you're hearing are from the streaming. It's super processor intensive. Sorry about that. It's pretty bad. That's kind of annoying. I'd take that out. The Kowalski sound needs to be up a little bit louder in the mix, in my opinion. Loud there. So I'm gonna delete all of this because it doesn't need to be there. Too loud. I think that's good for now. I don't think we're gonna be able to finish this up in one night without dragging it along too far. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna save this track as always save tracks as a different version. Just it takes up absolutely no space. I'm gonna call it Stream 2 Recap, and we will save that. And I'm gonna go ahead and do collect all and save. And what that does is it kind of what they call self-contains the session. So every sample that I've used in this track is now in that folder. And yeah, so now I'm gonna take that and I'm gonna upload it to the Dropbox folder. And then you will all have the ability to look at what progress was made. You can go back and look through the through the video and see what was done. You can play around with it, you can mangle it, you can delete it, you can, get on the mic and rap over it, do whatever you want. Just have fun with it, explore, realize that you can't break anything, and just try to study the approach and see what you can do with it. So this has been really super fun for me, and I hope it's been fun for you. Any questions before we sign off here? Questions. I only drank half my beer, so I've got some time. Let's make another track. Let's do that. Let's take baby steps. Baby steps, Dave. This is my first week as a little streamer or whatever they call it. So yeah, I don't plan on going anywhere. Literally, I don't plan on going anywhere. I am in my apartment, stocked up on groceries. We've got beer over there, everything. Shout out to Dorst Express, the delivery service. They're amazing angels in these situations where they're putting themselves on the front lines to make sure that everybody else can stay in their apartment as much as possible. They didn't sponsor this, but I think that the grocery store workers and all the people that are getting us, making sure that we have everything that we need for staying in our apartment, they're super valuable, and I have a lot of respect for them. What kind of beer? It is, we've got, I don't know if you can see it. It's Bierlo, German IPA. I like the German IPAs because it's a very modest flavored IPA. Omer, I hope I'm pronouncing one of those two versions right. Is there a specific dB that you leave the master output before sending it out to mastering? I always give like 6 dB of headroom. And the more headroom you give a mastering engineer, the better off it's going to be. But 6 dB is plenty. So that's what I do, and that's what most mastering engineers are gonna listen for. Any other questions? Any struggles? Anything that's on your mind? Non-techno, non-Ableton related? Also, now that class is out, I noticed that Chris Liebing is about to start a live stream, and he has contributed to this project. And so I guess Chris is, the after party is in Chris Liebing's living room. So we'll go from my living room over to Frankfurt and have a nice time there. So be sure to chime in with him and drop him a line and thank him for all the samples that he donated. When is the next session? There is, that's to be determined. What I'm gonna do with sessions is, I'm still exploring the options. I've used Twitch a few times. I might go on YouTube and just start working, but I wanna treat the Facebook live streams as kind of a more structured thing. Like I really wanted to tackle arrangement in this live stream, but I want to treat maybe YouTube and Twitch as like if you were a professor and you were teaching class, Facebook Live would be the class, and then Twitch and YouTube or whatever, those would be kind of like office hours where you can drop in. I'm going to be just doing my work in the office, making tracks, and you can drop in and with questions that you have on your mind, you can kind of watch what I'm doing. And yeah, and processor permitting, I'll try to do that on a pretty regular basis. I'm really having a lot of fun doing this, and I hope it's been fun for you all too, because it's been a great thing to keep my mind off of the chaos outside, and it's really given kind of a sense of connectedness and community. So thanks for all of that. Where am I from? I am from Indiana in the USA. Born and raised. What do you think of the new Love Parade in 2021 in Berlin? I did not know about it until you brought it up. I love the idea. Thank you. Okay. I'm not sure if this fits in the session, but I'd be curious, what synthesizers are you usually using and what you can advise. For beginners with synthesizers, if there is one synthesizer, one piece of hardware, I assume that maybe not. If it's hardware, I would say if you're getting your first synthesizer, a Nord Lead or Nord Rack 2 is amazing because it is one knob per function. And that's something that I really